Okay, welcome back to the Stellify podcast. It was only a short time ago I had my good friend Chris Nicolson on. Chris is a shamanic practitioner, astrologer, sound therapist, Reiki teacher, crystal healer, public speaker, and much more. And we explored Chris's vast knowledge of the esoteric and spiritual arts on the last podcast, and that chat was very rich. Very enjoyable, but we had quite a few gremlins, and it was interesting because there was no reason for those gremlins, it seemed, during the conversation. Everything was clear while we were talking with each other. It's the first time it's ever happened for me, and it's never happened since either, since I've had a couple of podcasts since as well, and nothing's happened again. But it was getting some strong response from listeners, and they were struggling to hear. So thankfully, Chris has returned for a part 2, and this time we're going to dive even deeper into the unseen realms, and we're heading into the crux and the important part, if you like, of our first podcast, and that was about mediumship. And you know, it's one area that Chris feels very compelled to speak on, and it may ruffle a few feathers, especially mediums that are practicing, especially those that have maybe just started or have been doing it for many years. So, but the question is, can mediums truly know or what they are channeling? Could many of the entities coming through be tricksters or darker forces wearing disguises? And if so, what does that mean for how we navigate the spiritual realm? So welcome back, Chris. It's an honor and always a privilege to chat to you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me back on, Anne. It's a real honor to be back on the show. It's always good to chat, mate. As you know, we have a good blather, as we say in Scotland. It was very interesting, the last chat. I loved the conversation. I was in my van that time. I was parked up in a friend's yard within line of sight of his Wi-Fi router, and was all plugged into his power to make sure my laptop was working. And it, you know, obviously it wasn't us, as you already described, and things went a bit awry. And when we spoke afterwards about the gremlins and the works, it did not surprise me, because this is the first time I've spoken in public about this subject, and it is a very controversial one. It's definitely a subject that there's a number of people are going to be a bit upset and, you know, perhaps completely disagree with what I've got to say on this subject, and that's okay. You know, I'm not trying to say that I'm definitely right, but this is an opinion that I've come to over many years, and I would really like to be able to fully express and say it in a way that people can sit and listen properly, which was again part of, you know, me agreeing to come back on and do this again. I've gone out and bought a condenser mic, and I'm also plugged into the Ethernet to make sure that there's not going to be any blips in service or anything. So trying to stack the odds in our favor on my side for this interview. So it will be very interesting if this ends up with some gremlins. You know?
If it does, I'll be even more shocked. I mean, it was perfect when we were talking last time, and I know that you spent money to even enhance the situation. Let's see what happens. But
yeah.
So, Chris, okay, let's get back into it then. I mean, I talked about, as you know, with my podcast, I talk about this realm.
Yeah.
And there is in my opinion, an overlay hijack on this realm. That's the opinion I've come to with my research, be it the demiurge and archonic energies that are, or demonic energies that are infiltrating humanity and causing problems in terms of control and everything else. Now, I've got friends who are mediums. I've been to mediums. And I know from some of the mediums I've spoken to that would say, well, you know, they brought a person's loved one forward, and the stories they've had is it's brought joy to that individual that's there, you know, that's there to feel supported. You know, maybe they've just lost a loved one, etc., and it's brought peace of mind or whatever. But are we saying that potentially this isn't the case? There's another layer of trickery.
So that's an interesting point that you bring up, and I as I sort of said there while you were talking, I also have some friends who are mediums, and they're beautiful souls, great people who in many cases want to be of service and to help others. And as you and I both know, we both want to be of service. So, you know, I have high regard for them as individuals. However, as a direct response to what you just said, and for just clarity straight off the bat, I believe, it's my understanding, that all mediumship activity is flawed. Now, as you just described, some of those mediums will say, this brought solace, this brought peace of mind, this brought an ability for the person supposedly receiving a message from a relative, brought them to a space where they were comforted by it. And this had a knock-on effect. And I know that that is true in certain circumstances. However, I see it, and I have learned that there are greater forces at play, and there's a bigger impact beyond that small positive impact. And that bigger impact, it doesn't balance out the good. It's negative, and there isn't an equality in that. It greatly outbalances that short-term temporary positivity.
Yeah.
So it's I've discussed this subject with a few individual friends who are mediums, a couple of them in particular, and we've spoken through the subtle nuances of it. We've spoken through the aspects of what they believe that they're given to their clients or to the people that they're speaking to from the stage. For you know, a couple of them go to the spiritualist church and give readings there, and I've challenged them on a few elements from my understanding, and we've come to some really interesting places. Unfortunately, none of them have managed to change my mind, and I am willing to change my mind. We should always be willing to change our mind.
I agree.
You can't be very dogmatic in one viewpoint. You have to challenge. This is something we've spoken about before. You know, if you only look at information that backs up what you believe, then that's confirmation bias. And that does not help you gain the full available knowledge and understanding. And if you want to really prove something to be right, try and prove it wrong. And that's okay to try and prove it wrong. In fact, it's really good to do that, because if you can't prove it wrong, if you continue to prove it correct, it becomes stronger in your understanding, and your knowledge and capacity to express this to others increases. So it's a win-win. And if it's wrong and you prove it wrong, well, you've learned a lesson. That's kind of what science does. That's how science is supposed to work.
Trust the science, Chris.
Well, no.
To a point.
Well, yeah. I mean,
you're right. You are right.
Yeah.
Joking aside,
talking this way today without science. You know, we can be citizen scientists and do stuff. But yeah. We have to challenge. We have to look at things.
Yeah, we do.
So, I first visited the spiritualist church when I was around about 21. So 30 years ago now. I'm 51 now. And I had grown up, as we discussed in the last podcast, I had grown up in a high control group, Second Adventist Christian cult, and was excommunicated from that, going through traumatic experience as a teenager that led me to a very questioning path, to not believing men in suits, and to being like Toto, the dog in The Wizard of Oz, pulling back the curtains to see the man pulling the levers and wanting to know, wanting to understand not just the surface level, but the layers and layers below to really get at the heart of the understanding for any given subject that I was looking at. And so when I went along to the spiritualist church, it was one up in Scotland, I obviously I got a message. It was supposed to be from my grandmother, and I asked questions both during the I was going to say the performance, but both during the reading and afterwards when I was speaking privately to the medium. And he couldn't answer a certain couple of questions. And it really puzzled me, made me really think deeper. And there was something that just didn't sit right with me. So I parked it for a bit, was looking at other stems of knowledge. But whenever something that was related to mediumship came up, I would add it into that little collection of bits of knowledge that was growing from that beginning point with that visit.
Yeah.
When I then spent a little bit of time looking into the mystery schools and beginning unsuccessfully to try and study with them, because I couldn't. The mystery schools here in the West are Christian based, and I just couldn't do it.
Yeah,
I did get handed a list of literature to go and read, and that was a font of absolute knowledge. It is a fantastic source of information.
Yeah.
And part of that source of information really clearly states some stuff about mediumship.
Right.
So in our last podcast, I read a section of a book, which I would quite like to read again, if that's okay.
Yeah, feel free.
Let me just stick my glasses on.
People might be able to hear it this time with a bit of luck.
Well, hopefully, yeah. So, okay. So, just to set the scene, in this book, this is a book about somebody joining the mystery schools, and it's written by an esoteric, very high, and a gentleman who was very high in the esoteric realm in the 20th century. And he really understood his stuff. He was a high occultist and was involved in loads of stuff. He created and wrote many books and tarot decks and gave explanations on the old school tarot decks like the Rider-Waite and so on. Very, very knowledgeable guy. And he wrote this book, which, as occult knowledge does, they have layers within layers within layers, and even down to the name of the book and the pseudonym that he uses, and then the character who's in it, which is him as well. So he's got these layers in the names of who is involved, and it all stems back to this one particular man. Okay. So the character in the story is traveling around Europe and looking at medieval buildings, looking for esoteric hidden information, sacred geometry, and so on. And he has been initiated into some of the mystery schools and is able to connect with teachers around Europe. So when he travels to, I think in this case he's in Rome or somewhere in Italy, if I remember correctly, and he goes along to a class that's run by one of the occult teachers. So in this guy's house, there's a whole bunch of students. So you can imagine 15 or 20 people sitting around on cushions, asking questions of the adept. So rather than having a pre-prescribed talk to give them, he's just fielding questions and seeing where that takes him. But he does have some ideas in mind of where he'd like to talk about certain things. So they're talking about the moon. They have, which is a whole different discussion as well. I have some.
Oh, I'd love that.
I have some very strong views on the moon. I think it's a bit weird. I'm not a great
fan. I think it's a bit weird. We'll definitely do that sometime.
Yeah. So let me just find the right bit. Okay. Bear with me. Right, there we go. I think this is the right point. Yeah. He looked around at our faces as though to indicate that he had arrived at the most important point of the evening. And so now we must look at an esoteric truth which touches on the very edge of what is permissible. What I have to say will be greatly disturbing for many people of modern times. It will disturb because it is generally taken for granted that clairvoyancy, mediumship, and spiritualistic activity are somehow linked with spiritual development and consequently of benefit to mankind. Unfortunately, this is far from the truth. A vast amount of our so-called spiritualist literature pertains to channeling and clairvoyancy, which is far from beneficial for the development of mankind. Indeed, not to mince words, I should tell you that it is distinctly harmful. I must now make a statement which will introduce to you a concept which was, until comparatively recently, one of the deepest secrets of the esoteric schools. In some ways, the moon is the greatest problem of esoteric lore. The moon is not at all what it appears to be. At the end of the last century, so therefore Victorian times he's talking about, an astounding revelation was made as a result of dissent among members of secret schools. Information hitherto guarded jealously by the most enclosed of the inner orders was made public. The secrets disclosed pertain to a far deeper level of knowledge than has hitherto been made exoteric by the schools, even in this enlightened age. His trace of cynicism seemed to go by unnoticed. Our purpose here is not to document how so deep an esoteric idea was made public, or even to assess whether it was wise for this idea to be brought out into the open. All this has been dealt with in the literature, and if any of you wish to follow this up, I will give you a few titles later. In a nutshell, what was made public during this conflict in the schools was the truth that our school is a sort of counterweight to another sphere, which remains invisible to ordinary vision. This counterweighted sphere is called in esoteric circles the eighth sphere. We must be careful with these words, for in spite of what I have just said, this region is not itself a sphere, nor is it a moon. Even to locate it behind the physical moon is not correct, for in the spiritual realm, spaces and distances are different. The truth is that this eighth sphere does not pertain to anything we are familiar with on this physical plane. Yet we must use words from our own vocabularies whenever we wish to denote its existence. Were we to use a word which fits most appropriately this sphere, then we should really call it a vacuum. Certainly, vacuum is a more appropriate term than sphere, for the eighth sphere sucks things into its own shadowy existence. This sphere is lower in the scale of being than the seventh sphere, which is the earth. It acts as a sort of demonic conduit to suck into its maws certain degenerate spiritual forms on the earth. It is a shadow sphere controlled by shadow beings. However, the fact that they are shadow beings should not lead us to demote or underestimate their capabilities and intelligence. In many respects, they are more intelligent than man, for they are not limited by the power of love, as is mankind. The operation of this eighth sphere is complex. Its denizens, those shadowy beings for whom it is home, wish to people their sphere with humanity, or more accurately, with human souls. Towards this end, it has erected what we might call terminals on this earth. These terminals are soul conduits, which will suck into the lower sphere a certain form of materialized spiritual energy that is engendered on the earth plane. The most usual circumstances where this materialization or engendering takes place is in seances, and in other localities wherein human beings attempt to meddle against the cosmic law with the lower etheric plane. Philip, one of the students, was having difficulties with this curious account of the lunar powers and asked, "Are you saying that spiritualist activity is itself victimized by the eighth sphere?" Yes, Philip. Certain spiritualist activity is coloured by the erroneous belief that the realm of the dead is accessible to the living. In truth, mediumistic activity cannot penetrate through into the true realm of the dead. It is therefore dealing only with shadows. In so doing, it is creating fodder for the nourishment of the eighth sphere. This sucking of certain forms of human soul matter into the eighth sphere is not by any means intended for the benefit of humanity. The aim of the denizens of this world is to enhance and populate a world which may truly be described as the realm of the damned. The efforts of these denizens, or demons, is contrary to the evolutionary development which has been planned for the world. In truth, the human being was not designed to become a shadow being, captive in a demonic sphere. It was designed to become a god. It is less than 100 years since this knowledge of the eighth sphere was made public. At first, there was an outcry at this breach in initiate knowledge, but now we can see that it has proved something of a blessing, that the demonic threat has been brought out into the open. In some ways, it is easier to deal with a visible enemy. Those who dabble in the supposed communications with the dead and with that spirit land which they fondly imagine lies beyond the veil have not gone unwarned. So, I could go on, but I think that sums up the crux of what I want to say. And this book that I have a physical copy, but I keep it saved, a PDF on my phone, so that I can read it to people in appropriate moments rather than having to carry a thick, meaty tome around with me all the time. It actually has footnotes. So in the section where he says, I can give you some titles later on, there's a footnote, and then in the bibliography, there are a list of books from the 20th century that you can reference and have a look at for yourself. And when this information was made public, which is around the time of Blavatsky and, you know, all of those schisms that happened in the secret schools, you can read it all. You can go and have a look back. We're in an age today of supposed spiritual awakening. There's two kinds of awake that's happening. People are becoming awake and aware of what's going on in the world and the powers that be that are controlling them, and then there's spiritual awakening, and they often overlap, but they are two very distinct, different paths. And I know people who are awake to what's going on in the world but are in no way spiritual, and I know people who are very spiritual who are in no way awake to what's going on in the world.
Agreed.
But there is quite a crossover as well.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, no, I agree. There's a line in that, Chris, which was quite the influence of love that humanity has, or something. Yeah, I thought that was quite an interesting line, because we are very emotional beings. We're played very much with our emotions. If it's not love, it's fear as well. But if these beings are devoid of emotion, detached from any kind of emotion, and they have foul play as an intention, that's good. There's not a lot. It's going to be very difficult to discern that, I would imagine, as a medium, if that's
very cunning, very, very cunning, and very cunning indeed. And yes, that is a really important line. They're not limited by the power of love as we are. It's kind of what the line says in the book. And it's interesting the way you develop that, as you commented on it, where we suffer, as it were, from emotions that cloud our thinking and stop us being rational and stop us, you know, being very clear-headed on a given subject. Our love, our fear, our anxiety, whatever emotion bubbles to the surface, can cloud our judgment. And they actually feed on, or many of them feed on our emotional energy, our energy in motion, emotion.
Yeah.
They feed off of that. You see those elemental beings, those non-physical beings that feed off individuals. They often live in a fearful, anxious, depressed, psychologically tortured state. And as they lose their power, it's handed over to these other beings. So this is more a spiritual path understanding. I remember speaking to someone, and they were talking about a particular path that they follow, which I don't really agree with. A way of life that I don't think is very spiritual. And I said, I'm not really into that kind of stuff. It was related to like porn and that kind of thing. I said, I'm very spiritual. I'm not really into that. That's not for me. And they said, well, yeah, but I'm spiritual. I do, my stuff with mediumship. I didn't really want to say to that person, well, actually, like there's spirituality, which is your own spiritual path. And then there's spiritualism, which can, there's subtle differences in them, but I follow a path of spirituality, not follow a path of spiritualism. And that's what I believe that person was doing. Who, and no judgment. Do whatever you want to do. If that's your kind of thing, carry on. I will defend your right to do the things that you want to do, as long as it brings no harm.
No harm to any other. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But it's interesting that they specifically believe that mediumship, as it mentions in the book, it's an erroneous belief that this is for the benefit of mankind. So this makes us ask the question, why, other than, filling that realm, and what's the mechanism of that? How would they actually do it? And why do so many people think that mediumship activities are of benefit, and doing seances and using the Ouija board? Now, I work as a shamanic practitioner, and as we discussed in the last podcast, this was a path that I did not intend to go down, and I actually wouldn't recommend it. It's become a bit of a buzzword to work as a shaman.
Everyone's a shaman now,
but it's a really hard path.
Well, you're chosen to be it. You wouldn't go out to be a shaman. It amazes me the amount how it rolls off people's tongues.
Yeah.
It was not Chris. It wasn't that long ago. My daughter was dating someone, and he's like 18, and he said to her, "I'm a shaman," and I said to my daughter, "He is not a shaman." Not to be a judgmental fucker, but he isn't.
No, I know, and it has really, it's become this key phrase that many people want to adopt, want to use in their healing practice, and they think it can be done in a very much love and light manner. But it's not. There's a lot of dark stuff in there. There's some really dangerous stuff. There's some isolation. There's some really extremely dark, dangerous, and difficult paths that you have to walk down primarily alone. You can get some support, and you can have teachers and mentors who will guide you a little bit, but that time where you have to walk into the spiritual dark wood in the middle of the night without a torch or a compass or your phone for a light, because it's it's a metaphorical walk into that forest, you're doing it alone. You're doing it yourself, and you have to be very well protected, and you have to learn and study and put in years and years and years of practice to create that protected space for yourself. If you're working with clients and with a space, I do soul clearance, and I cleanse houses, and I help move trapped souls, which is a clear distinction to be made from the realm of the dead. So when a person dies, obviously some people don't believe in reincarnation or that the soul lives on. I do believe that. I've seen enough evidence that I think it's, and you can't dispute it. But others are entitled to their opinion, and I could be wrong. But having seen that realm and seen that our soul moves on, our soul does step onto that other realm. Our soul is supposed to follow a particular path. When we die, it comes out of our body. It goes in a state where it reviews the life. What lessons did I give myself? What ones did I notice? What ones did I ignore? What do I need to teach myself in the next life? And then they choose the next chapter. But some spirits can get stuck, particularly if they're whipped out of this life really quickly, be it on a battlefield, in an accident, in a murder, or anything that can take a soul very, very quickly. And so those souls don't actually leave this realm. They're not in the realm of the dead. They're in that middle space. They're in a space that they're trapped. And the longer they're there, the more difficult it is for them to move on. And so one of the paths that many people who follow what could be classed as a shamanic journey, many of them do, myself included, is to help those souls to move on. And when they move on, when you help them to step across to the other side, you can't speak to them after that. They're gone. So when someone says to me, "Oh, I've got a message here, it's from your grandmother," to me, that's like one of the worst things that could happen. I don't want my grandmother or any other relative to have their soul get stuck here. There is a natural path for them to go. I don't believe that reincarnation is a trap, is a soul trap. I don't agree with that. Again, could be wrong, but it's not my understanding that that's correct. So our souls are supposed to move on and grow, and each life is a chapter in the storybook of your oversoul, and you have over uncountable lifetimes to come to a point where your soul has grown and evolved to a point where it has expanded its knowledge, and either to return to source or to become a god or whatever the end result is supposed to be, which is another matter. So, like, I have done some work recently where there was a cafe where the owner, through a friend of mine, got in contact. This guy doesn't believe in anything. If he can't see it, touch it, taste it.
Okay. Materialism.
Yeah, doesn't believe in anything. However, owns a bar, and everything was going wrong in this bar. The till kept breaking down, big expensive till, had to be replaced multiple times. The music system kept breaking down. The keys kept getting lost. The cellar door kept breaking. The list went on and on and on and on, until it started not just affecting their takings, it then started affecting customers. A customer got locked in the toilet and couldn't get out in one of the toilets, and they had to basically break the door down to get this person out. So he's speaking to his friend. His friend says, "Look, I know somebody who can do a cleanse on your place." I went out. I've had someone with me. We were both working on it, and we found that this is in an old town, and the building itself has been used for, I think, well over 1,000 years. And there were 3 spirits that we found attached to this building. 2 of whom couldn't remember their names. They'd just been in this loop. One of them was like a washerwoman. Another one was like a chef. Right. And they were just going through this process. But the main spirit who was causing the problems was the spirit of a man who had been involved in quite a high-profile murder of a local politician. And had then been killed. The people that he was in the conspiracy with stabbed him in the back, and he ended up getting the trouble for it and ended up a pauper. And he was supposed to have inherited this bit of land, and it's a whole big story, but really interesting what we found out. The guy who owned the pub was in the bar while we were discovering this and speaking to the spirit and finding out, and he sat like that And then he's like, I was supposed to go away and come back, but this is better than television. This is so fascinating. So he sat watching and asking questions, and we did the cleanse. We got these spirits moved on so that they weren't here anymore. We can't communicate with them anymore. They've moved on. Soul release has happened. His bar now has everything working fine. He's very happy.
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't go and speak to those spirits anymore because they've moved on. But they were stuck. That guy was stuck here from the time of the Roundheads, Oliver Cromwell.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's in a town that Cromwell's army had destroyed the castle there and had come in and taken over. And obviously they took over the whole country, but this one in particular was attacked many times. So it was from that time period. I've got countless stories that I could share about going to both graveyards and to battlefields, and even just walking along the shore. In Scotland, the witch trials happened quite extensively, and in the Lothians, so Edinburgh and the Lothians, Edinburgh being the capital, they eventually stopped. They realised that this became an actual witch hunt where it was women and men who were being killed just by people who didn't like them. And so they stopped the witch hunts. But over the water, over the Firth of Forth and to the north, in Fife, the witch trials continued. And they would send, there's a little town along the coast from Edinburgh called North Berwick. They would send people from the south side on these little ferry boats across to a place called Pitt and Weem. And the Weem witches, there's a book, The Weem Witches, you can go and see a place there that the witches were killed. And my friend, who is a witch, is the only person in history to have resided in this building as a tenant where the witches were killed, because it's owned by the church. And while she lived there, we went and did some big cleanses. It was amazing, helping these spirits move on. So they're all trapped souls.
Chris, can I ask you something? How do you discern that those are spirits and not tricksters, demonic?
So that's a good question. Let's use some of them as an example. So I've just been talking about Pitt and Weem. The building that I'm talking about is called the Great House, and it was an administrative centre for the church in Fife for 1,000 years. And when Edinburgh stopped the witch trials, they continued and were able to take people from other areas. And it was about 15 years ago now that the then resident minister decided that they didn't like the house, and so went and rented another house in the village. And the church decided to put this building up for rent, for private rent, for the first time in 1,000 years. My friend, who is one of my mentors, was living just a few miles away, was needing to move out of the cottage that she lived in, and went on the internet to look for somewhere to stay. Is not good. She's one of these two finger trying to type things, and she's not that au fait with the internet, and yet within 5 minutes of going online, she found that this house was up for rent. She was one of two groups of people that was supposed to view the place. The other couple didn't turn up, and then the people who were letting it said to her upon arrival, "Let us know quickly, please, because we have over 750 people interested in renting this house. But you're first come, so you get first dibs." 2022. There's a graveyard surrounding 2/3 of the building, and she's one of my mentors. She's a very spiritual person. She's one of the people who taught me soul release. And she contacted me and said, "You need to come and help. There's some stuff out there in the graveyard. We need to help these spirits." So we went out. We did some work that I'll not quite go into the details of, but essentially opening a doorway, a portal to help them go en masse. None of those spirits that we saw go through were that interested in interacting with us.
Right.
None of them came to us with messages. None of them asked us for anything. None of them stayed with us. We essentially, to all intents and purposes, we walked over, opened the door that they couldn't open themselves.
Yeah.
They then moved through. We shut the door behind. Job done. They were gone. So there's no real. It's not the same as someone who's a medium who says they've got a guide who's with them all the time and is giving messages. And this is very different. We were walking along the shore one day in Fife, not far from in the little coastal villages, and we're both struck at one point in this desolate area, just beach, beautiful bit of beach, but there was no buildings or anything. And she stopped, and I could feel this sense and didn't know what it was. And I asked, and she said, I can see there's a young girl standing out there. She's standing in the water. Now, one of the ways that they would kill some of these so-called witches is at low tide, they would tie them to a stake that was driven into the sands. And when the water came in, if they didn't die of exposure, they died of drowning.
Yeah.
And this young girl could see, well, our spirit had remained.
Okay.
So as we tuned in and looked, we could see her, and we could almost see like this body lying down on the beach. And there was this cord running between the two.
Wow.
So in soul release, you have to cut that cord. It's called the silver cord. It comes out of your solar plexus. It's the same cord that when you leave to go astral traveling, it's the sword that tethers you to your physical body.
Okay.
So her physical body had long since deteriorated and gone. But to her, to the spirit, the body was still there. So she could see it. And in seeing that, what our job is to take a tool that we've made and to cut that cord and then to rub it back to her body, and then the other end rub it back to what they see to the spirit. And in that disconnection, all anxiety, stress, all emotions just evaporate. There's just this calmness appears on the face of the spirit. The two halves of the cord are like a live wire that's been cut, that's bouncing about. You know, if the overhead wires come down on a wet and wild day and you can see them sparking in the water on the road, they're kind of like that, and they're trying to reconnect. But so we rub them back both to the body and to the spirit, and that disconnects them, and then the spirit can. Then there's another stage that we go through to help the spirit move on. So there's no request for us to give of anything other than a bit of time and use the knowledge that we've got. There's no asking us for any favors or giving us any messages. It's nothing like that. It's literally, here's a soul that's trapped. Let's try and discover as much as we can, and now let's help in the best way possible for that soul to move on. So there's not really any space for that to be a masquerading entity, because why would they want to move on? The denizens of the 8th sphere, they can come and go. They've set up these terminals. They've influenced people. They've influenced people in power, but they also influence just individuals who only have power over themselves. They want as many souls as they can to be trapped into their soul trap. That is the real soul trap, the 8th sphere. That is Dante's Inferno. That is that realm of the damned. And, you know, eventually they will get out. But that's a long, 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 many lifetimes path before they can recover their soul enough to escape that place. And this is part of the reason why I want to have this discussion. I want to warn people that if you follow a mediumship path, if you participate regularly in seances, If you try and reach out to the so-called dead for advice, for a way to try and help others, if you're of service, then unfortunately you're putting yourself in an extremely dangerous position. You're putting yourself not necessarily in an extremely dangerous position right now, although that does happen, which I'll come to shortly. But it's more so when you cross over. When you come to that point where you're moving on to the next life, they've already, with this process, it's like they've tied lines, tied ropes around your spirit, so that when your spirit crosses, and you're already communicating with them as well, and you think they're the good guys, and they're like, come this way, we've got this tunnel of light for you to come down, and you happily follow them and are taken away into that realm. Very, very, very dangerous. And to me, it's really important to stick my neck on the line here a little bit and say, not just some, but to be clear, all mediumship activities have that erroneous belief. It's not are some mediums perhaps channeling spirits that are dangerous to them. It's all of them. It's very clear that it's all of them.
You mentioned the spirit guide, the guides that mediums have as well, you know, and I know from speaking to mediums that often they would have a guide that would come to them, if you like, and provide them information. Not necessarily that a loved one has come from spirit to the, but there's this guide.
Yeah.
So what is that in your opinion? What is this guide?
So guides can take a number of forms. We're looking at non-physical conscious beings, often known as entities for short. But just to clarify what they are conscious beings, but they don't have a physical body like we have.
Yeah.
So we call them entities. But the realm of the non-physical beings is as varied as the animal kingdom. There are many different shapes and sizes and types. There are some out there that are malevolent, and there are a number that are benevolent. But when it comes to those within the eighth sphere, I have yet to find any literature or understanding to say that there are benevolent ones there. They're specifically, all of them, trying to take people to, you know, they live in a realm of the damned. How can there be any benevolent spirits there? So when it comes to a guide, so as a shamanic practitioner, the closest I could be brought to a spiritual belief system would be to animism. The idea that every single thing is animated. Trees have consciousness. Rocks have consciousness. I love crystals. So crystals, individual crystals, have consciousness. Rivers, streams, the ocean, Mother Earth, the sun, they all have consciousness. And there's different fractal levels of consciousness. So there's consciousness everywhere, and we can be guided, like, you know, the shamans in the jungle who talk about how the trees will guide them, and the spirit of the plant will, you know, like the story of ayahuasca. Ayahuasca's a vine in the jungle, and you have to mix it with another plant, the chacuna plant, the leaf of the chacuna plant, to create the inhibitor that stops your liver from processing the ayahuasca, the active ingredient in it. And it was the spirit of the tobacco, the masculine tobacco plant, that the shaman will tell you. You see them if you go to the jungle or watch the documentaries, when they're stripping the bark off the trees, they have mapacho tobacco, and they're blowing it on the wound on the tree. And they say that the mapacho spirit taught them that they should go and hunt for this vine amongst the many myriad of vines, and then look for this one particular plant that looks like thousands of other plants in the jungle, and combine the two of them into the tea that would allow them to speak to the gods and speak to the spirit realm. Really interesting. So it's my understanding that there are spirits that are benevolent in those ways, and they help to teach us and help us heal ourselves. And when we have guides, my own thought process to this, and this is my own personal experience, and as I've said before, and I say again, and I do mean it, I could be wrong, is that the guides that I have that come through to assist me are not actually out with myself. They're part of my higher self. They're actually, and I've done a lot of research into this, as you would in this journey, this kind of journey. They're actually parts of they're my past lives, essentially. I've got one guide who is a little diminutive Oriental, and through past life regression, it's a past life of mine. So actually, it's still me. It's not outside. It's not outside me. It's still me. That's one of my guides. So when we have a person who's doing mediumship activities, and they have a guide that comes in and communicates with them, or has a number of them, there is a potential that some of those that give them knowledge are their own past lives and part of themselves. But then there are others who will come in, and they allow them to come in and welcome them, who are not. And those would be non-physical conscious beings who wish to have a host. And that host will feed them, they'll praise them, they'll help them, they'll feed them. They feed them their energy. I spoke to one of my medium friends, and asked that person, you know, hundreds of people in the spiritualist church, how many of those who give messages, how many of them are ill? And he was like, actually quite a lot. I said, well, out of 100. And it was over 90.
So over 90 out of 100 are sick
in some way. That was his reply, not mine. Okay. He 9 out of 10 of them have some, whether it's a physical ailment or an illness, perhaps they're wheelchair bound or walking sticks or crutches or some mobility problems, or they've got anxiety, stress, depression, or they've got like an actual illness, a full on something wrong with their body illness. So he's not ill. He's very, very healthy. And I know of some others who are very healthy. But as I mentioned earlier, to me, these are signs. So these spirits have tapped into these individuals, and they take more than they give. They'll say, right, there's someone coming along, and I can tap into the Akashic records, and I can tell you, because I can tell you what their relative would have done, and I'll masquerade as their dead relative. Because everything you've ever done, everything you've ever said, every experience you've ever had is written down in your Akashic records, and those can be read by others. So a masquerading spirit can go in and read those records and then say exactly the lines that your auntie or grandmother or whoever would have said, quote her mannerisms, the things that she liked, her favorite music, her favorite television shows, what she liked to do for a pastime and a hobby, all of that stuff, and could tell you where she'd lost her, ruby ring and those kind of things. So, and these are taken as evidence. Can anyone take this?
Of course.
But it's not necessarily that it is their relative, because a masquerading spirit can read that information and pretend.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So it's my understanding that many of these guides are doing exactly that. I was at a festival that you were at.
Okay.
A few years ago.
Okay.
I'll not name it, but it was the first time we met.
Yeah, I remember the festival. Yeah.
So there was a really lovely lady set up her tent right next to where I was working, and she had to move the following day. we'd set up a grid of protection.
I remember.
And she
Yes,
moved over to the entrance, to where you came into the healing land.
That's correct. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and she said that some of her guides had gone quiet. And she couldn't do her work.
Okay.
Now, during that festival, it might have been that one, or it might have been the one a month later, because it was run twice that year.
Yeah, it was.
There was a guy who was celebrating his birthday, and he was there with his dad and somebody else, and
he disappeared.
He disappeared, and she helped find him.
That's right. I remember that. Yeah.
Right. So she helped find him, which is a great thing. It's a great thing. So here's an example of a guide giving assistance to help.
Yes. And she's a lovely lady, by the way.
She is. Very nice lady.
Lovely.
Very nice person. As are the other mediums that I know, really, really nice people. I don't to mock them or put a mark on their name or anything. It's just. So getting back to the point, she had to move. We'd set up a grid around our gazebo and van and protective space, and she was in that protective space, and she couldn't do her work and was befuddled by it. And she came along for a treatment, for a sound bath on the Sunday, the last day, and sat and told me all about this. And it was really strange, and I hope you weren't offended that I had to move away. And I just was smiling and saying, yeah, no, it's fine, that's okay, it's all right. And she's like, and some of the guides, they haven't come back. And that must have been the end of their work with me, and that's okay. I've got my other guides that come in, and I chose at that point not to say anything.
Yeah.
For the most part, I've not said anything. Over the last couple of years, I've spoke to a few people, and then made the choice to have the conversation with you and to come and do these interviews about it and go public for the first time. So that was really interesting. That and definitely a lovely lady.
Oh yeah.
I would be interested if she heard this podcast, if she remembered that and reached out and said something about it. But I've also heard of quite a number of times, and this is an unfortunate thing, where good-hearted mediums have taken a message from someone, or for someone, I should say, and have given it, and it has caused problems.
Okay.
For example, someone who was separated from the father of their child, who was not acting in a good manner, and a medium was talking to that person and said, your ex is kind of stalking you in your hometown and you need to be careful. So that person was frightened by this and kept their child essentially at home or in their care for the next 18 months.
Right.
And there was no trace of this man being there.
Okay. Right.
But this affected, I think, a 10, 11 or a 12, something like that. A young person. Their life for 18 months was affected by a message given by a good person. The medium's a good person. But gave this message that the person who took the message, and I've spoken to the person who got the message, and I know the medium as well. All nice people, but was given a message that actually really badly affected their child and made that person take steps that caused a problem for the child for the next 18 months, essentially putting them in isolation, not being able to go out and play properly, in a kind of fearful state. That's not healthy.
No, it's not.
That's overstepping the mark. So there are examples of that. There should be a code of ethics that should be followed by people giving advice and that kind of realm. And there isn't really. It's more of a personal ethics and morals that people apply to it. And I know, as I'm sure you do, many mediums who have high morals and powerful, strong ethics and are really, really good people.
Well, that's it. Yeah, generally they'll get into the work because they want to help people. I mean, not that, you know, some just come into that work. They've gone through a trauma. They're then recognizing a gift per se, if you like, or an ability that they didn't have before, and then they're in a position where they feel that they can use this to benefit others.
Yeah.
And we don't really know what we're dealing with, do we? You know, this is the thing. I mean, I have issue, as you know. I went down the angelic Reiki route initially, and this poses questions, you know, and I think it's worth posing these questions, you know, because I'm glad you mentioned that your guides, if you like, are in effect part of your higher self. Now, as you know, you're very well read, and you know what angelic Reiki is. It's a bit of maybe a washed down version of Usui, but you are calling in beings to assist with the healing.
Yes.
Do you know what you're really bringing in? Is the question that I started to ask myself and changed what I was doing, because I went down a path. I was listening to a Toltec guy, actually, very interested into the Toltec wisdom, and I was listening to this guy a few years ago now, and he was talking about archangels, and he was talking about them as being archons.
Yeah.
And I thought, whoa. And it made me question. I started questioning things then a little bit more. What is it we are communicating with?
Yeah.
We're in a trickster world. It's a very, very tricky world, this place.
It is.
And we have to be careful.
It's interesting that you mentioned the angelic Reiki. We have spoken about this, you and I, privately, of course, already. I teach Reiki. I'm nobody's master. You can master the art of a thing, like you can become a master carpenter or, you know, a master musician. To become a Reiki master means you've mastered the art or the practice of Reiki. It doesn't mean you're someone else's Reiki master, which has been kind of distorted, I've noticed over the years.
Yeah.
It was the early 2000s when I first went through Reiki attunements. And what I've seen grow and evolve from a time when very few people in this country knew what Reiki was, and you had to explain it every time you were talking to someone. It's now become ubiquitous. Everybody knows pretty much what Reiki is. And unfortunately, I would accept Reiki from probably about 5% of the people out there after a stern questioning to see what their practices are. And there are those types of Reiki that step away from the main Reiki tradition that to me are just USPs. They're just unique selling points that people are looking for something to be a little different. Somewhere, you know, where they're using some other thing. I've seen all sorts. I've seen Reiki that's been associated with cannabis, Reiki that's been associated with Rastafarianism. The Rastafarian community did not like that at all, and asked for the people to stop doing it.
I've seen. I remember when I was going to a festival, and I had this guy. It was like a guy almost competing with me for a spot. I'm not here to compete. I'm not bothered. But he was like almost saying he was like 10th Dan, Reiki, this, that, and the other. And I'm like, I don't really care. Like, you know, it's like if you want the spot, you have it.
yeah, exactly. You know, to my understanding with Reiki, you're channeling etheric energy in this little cube here. If we make a little cube in the air, a centimetre by a centimetre by a centimetre. Within that little centimetre cube, there is enough energy in there to power the whole world. And if we go to the next cube and the next cube and the next cube, there's unbelievable energy just in the room that you're in right now.
Absolutely.
So why do you need to go to some being? Why do you need to bring in some type of holy fire or anything like that that is going to help with your Reiki, when all you have to do is become the conduit? You're opening yourself, and becoming a master of the practice of Reiki is becoming a better conduit. You are like a tap or an American faucet that you're turning on, that you're allowing this to flow through.
Exactly.
It's not coming from you. It's not coming from your heart. It's coming. It's pouring in through your
through.
It's coming out through your hands. The tap gets wet as well, so you get a bit of healing.
That's right. That's right.
But you're just being a conduit. It does have your flavor.
Yes.
Through you as the conduit. So there are those subtle differences, and your intention is really important. And Reiki can actually do harm. I've actually very recently rewritten my Reiki teaching courses, and I've made them longer. And it's not to try and make more money. It's because so many students that I've taught over the years have come back with the same questions and the same problems, both in Reiki 1 and in Reiki 2 primarily.
Yeah.
And they've asked for this understanding, this gaining of wisdom, and when to do things, how to do things, when not to do things, what are the big list of contraindications, and when they're bringing that energy through, when they're being that conduit, what's the right way to do it? And too many people, unfortunately, when they're learning a craft these days, particularly a spiritual craft, they use that phrase, I take what resonates. If someone's been studying and learning a craft for decades, and they hand you this body of wisdom, and you just pluck out that little section and abandon the rest, that's a recipe for disaster. Now, if we're filling ourselves with knowledge, we will take what resonates, and then we study it and we research it and we try to prove it wrong, and what we prove right is what sits with us. That's a different thing. If you're learning how to do massage, for example, you don't abandon all the bits of massage that you don't like, that you don't resonate with, and just do the bits that you like. And yet, you have to do it all. You have to learn, because you don't want to damage the person's physical body.
Exactly.
The same is true with Reiki. You must do it properly. And I know of some people, unfortunately, who the two ends of the stick. One end, where the practitioner themselves become ill.
Okay.
They either don't do the protection properly, don't set the standard out for looking after the client and themselves properly. They jump in too quickly, trying to do large groups when they don't really know what they're doing. And they end up hurting themselves. They end up ill. And the other one, which in many ways is worse, is they go and start treating someone who's got a particular ailment, and that ailment then just runs through the person.
It gets worse. Yeah.
There are a few really, really good books on the subject, but they're not necessarily that easy to come by. There's one called, I think it's called Dancing with the Devil. I think it might be they're called that. I've got a copy of it in storage. That might not be the name, but something like that. And it's about the healing path and how there are dangerous elements to it. There's a great book by Alberto Villoldo, the well-known South American shaman, called Shaman, Healer, Sage. Really good book for those who are on that path. And it talks about the luminous light body and how you're working on that for your client, and how if you don't do it correctly every single time, you're potentially bringing about your own demise, or you're quickening the ailment that's sitting with your client. So it's to have these like I've had people come to me, and I've reattuned many people who've gone elsewhere for the Reiki 1 and 2, and they just don't, it doesn't feel right, or things go a bit wrong, or they just park it a bit. And then I'm speaking to them and they ask me, would you please reattune me? And I get them to bring along their little brochures that they get, their training manuals. And in many of these manuals today, there's a line that says Reiki can do no harm. That's not true. Like we've just been talking about it. Doing energy healing work incorrectly can fundamentally do harm. You have to be. There's another line I've seen on many of them recently as well that say you don't have to even be thinking about it. You could be sitting watching the television and just like, you know, chewing away on a bit of chewing gum with your hands on somebody. And
really?
It doesn't matter. The Reiki will go where it needs to go.
Really? Wow.
This is not just ridiculous, it's dangerous.
It is. It's silly, isn't it?
It's very, very dangerous. So to me, and I remember speaking to someone, again, a lovely person, no disrespect to the individual, but they do, and they teach another form of Reiki that's apparently advanced, and described the basic practice of Reiki as vanilla Reiki. And I was like,
vanilla Reiki?
Vanilla Reiki. I was like, that's so disrespectful. Like, it's the fundamental basics of what you're attempting to do. And Reiki is just a popularized term for energy work, for doing hands-on healing, laying on of the hands, which many people have been doing for millennia, long before Dr. Usui was working this out in Japan. And then obviously it spread to Hawaii into the US, and then was popularized in the rest of the Western world. It's just a very good and very well trained, if you do it the right way, a very good method to begin and to use as like a building block for doing other work. You know, if you're going to do like reflexology or massage or some other thing, if you've got, or sound therapy, you know, I use Reiki for sound therapy, and it amplifies it.
Oh, I can imagine.
It's fantastic. It's a brilliant assist in it, but you have to do it properly. Otherwise things can go awry. And if you've got a room full of 20, 30 people that you're doing sound bath for, and you're channeling Reiki at the same time, if you're not doing it right, things can go wrong on the day and in the days after.
There's a lot of energy there, isn't there?
Aye. Yeah.
All sorts of energy. A mixture.
Yeah. So I do worry about
Reiki.
Yes, indeed, mate. Yeah.
So I mean, this is the thing. This is where I've come to my understanding of research and podcasting and discussion and wisdom. Is this place obviously is not what we perceived growing up. It's not just a 3D realm, as we mentioned. There's an unseen, an unseen realm, and my understanding, very much so, of my research now, is this unseen realm has a hold on humanity in a large way, and especially those who are in power.
Indeed.
And it's fascinating, but this is the thing. Now, what interests me about your discussion about the 8th sphere and the soul trap. Now, I have a lot of people that, you know, as you know, I've had a lot of conversations about soul trap on podcasts. So I have a lot of audience, if you like, viewers that would watch this, and they don't want to come back, Chris. You know, their human experience in this lifetime isn't one where they wish to return. You know, I've had that. I've seen that comment many times on my podcasts. There's times in my life where I'm exhausted with this place as well. Not that I'm suicidal, because I'm not. But what I'm saying is, there are times where, would I really want to come back and do this again? You know what I mean? Does my soul need to do any more work? Do you know? So what is the next step then for a soul? Do you know? What's your understanding from? If you've
I've heard
finished.
those statements by many people as well, and yeah, it's totally understandable, particularly if if you've had a very difficult life, if both childhood and adulthood are traumatic experiences that leave the individual mentally, physically, and spiritually and emotionally exhausted. You can see why they look at the world with despair at those small number that are in power, that are clearly being led by those forces, those unseen forces, as you've just described, and are appalled by it and don't really want to come back. But no matter where you travel in the world, you will generally find, and this has been my personal experience, that people are inherently good.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Now, there are some who will say, oh, it's a greater percentage that are bad than are good. And I just fundamentally disagree with that.
I'm with you on that.
My reply to that is that a greater number of those in power are inherently bad.
Yeah.
But those of us who are not in power are inherently good for the most part. There are people who are affected by experiences, by traumas, who will be traumatized themselves and then will continue that cycle and create trauma for their own children and for other people. If we can help remove that trauma, could they fundamentally be a good person? I think that space is there, yeah. We've seen it happen in many. But I've traveled to places and spoke to locals and connected and got lost and got stuck and needed a helping hand. And everywhere I've gone, people have welcomed me into their homes, fed me, given me the fare to get to the places that I need to get to if necessary. Just, done that humanitarian thing of helping a fellow human being. And that's happened more to me than any negative stuff. And I've had a lot of negative stuff happen to me. I'm definitely a glass half full kind of person. And I relish the journey. It is hard. There's no doubt about it. And, as we spoke earlier on about the shamanic path and how you would get to that and why you would end up there, it's usually very difficult experiences. I had immense trauma as a teenager. I have complex PTSD from that. And I have certain difficulties that I have to process in my adult life, that I've done a lot of healing work. I've drank a lot of plant medicine and, done a lot of inner work and deep meditations and worked with some very wise souls who've helped me clear traumas and all sorts of stuff in my own personal journey. But the healing path never ends. No. It's something that I'll be doing until my final breath, along with learning. And yet, to me, the world is vibrant, it's rich, it's a paradise earth that we live on that has been damaged and distorted, but nonetheless is still fundamentally an amazing place filled with adventures and joys and beautiful souls and just pure magic. And I agree. Love it. I relish it. And my understanding of what happens at the end of this life is that we cross over. So our soul inhabits this vehicle for our intention, our physical body. It's like a car. Yeah. And our soul is the driver. And you get one tank of gas and you can go where you want. There are those who want to just do nothing and just polish and shine the bodywork and make it pristine. And there are those who are so overwhelmingly focused on the exterior of it that they never just go out and enjoy the bloody ride. It doesn't matter about the bumps and the dents and the scratches to the bodywork. That doesn't matter. What the real key and the real intent is, you're supposed to just wind the window down, stick on your favorite music and drive. Enjoy the ride, enjoy the journey. It's going to have bumps. It's going to have times when you're struggling to get uphill because it's really steep. And there's going to be windy bits where the weather is atrocious and you can't see more than a few inches in front of your vehicle and it's teetering on the edge of a cliff and you're in that panic mode, but you survive and you come down the other side and then you're in a valley that's beautiful and you've got great views and it's clear skies and the sun is shining and there's amazing people around and you've visited wonderful places. And it's this combination of all those experiences. And at the end of that tank of gas, you have this disconnection process where your spirit leaves that vehicle. And then it goes into a space where very briefly it can stay in contact and leave messages and then moves on. It goes to a space where you go through a life review. I don't really believe in a God. I believe that the judgment day that's spoken about is actually you yourself. You are your own judge. You review your whole life, every experience you ever had, and you look at the experience that you've had or experiences you've had through every individual's perspective. So if you did something horrible to a person or to a group of people, you will experience it from each of their perspectives and understand how they felt. But every other experience as well, you'll go through good, bad, and indifferent. And you'll get this broad perspective. And then you look at, what did I give myself in my astrology? What parents did I choose? What difficulties in childhood? Did I give myself any ailments or illnesses to overcome? What were my traumas? What were the things that made it hard for myself? And what were the things that I made it easy for myself, that I was good at, that I was capable above other people of doing? What things came to me easy? Did I go down that path? Did I take those things, those gifts that I gave to myself, and did I utilize them properly? Did I look at those difficulties and try and overcome them rather than see them as blocking my path, use them as stepping stones? Did I do that? Or did I just fuck the whole thing up? And do I need to go and do it all again? And once you've then gone through that process and made those judgments and judged yourself, you then go, okay, there's going to be a little period of processing. And for some faiths and belief systems like Buddhism, they think you come back pretty quickly. As you'll see when they look for the new Dalai Lama, it's always very quickly they're looking for this reincarnated soul. But there are other understandings, and the occult, esoteric, mystery schools believe it's a couple of centuries before you come back. And there are others who think it's a few decades. So who knows? Who knows how, time doesn't really exist over in that other realm. So perhaps it's a variable. But at some point, you then go, okay, it's time for another lesson. That lesson might not be on this earth. You might choose to incarnate somewhere else. You might choose to incarnate into a non-physical conscious being in another galaxy, and perhaps another part of this galaxy, another constellation. Perhaps here. You'll come as another human. You'll come as another child. Perhaps if you've had a few lifetimes as a male, you'll decide, well, I'm going to have a few lifetimes as a female. So I'll choose that life.
Well, it's 2025. You can be whatever you want, Chris.
Well, so on that kind of note, I think there's so many that's a looking at the exterior, and they're forgetting all the other stuff. Ultimately, we all chose, in my understanding, could be wrong, but my understanding is ultimately we all chose what we were born as for a reason, to learn. So if you're fighting with that and trying to go against that and trying to work against that and change everything, I think you're missing a point. By all means, and I will stand and defend and take a bullet for those who need to be defended. If you want to view yourself as something different and change who you are and be as long as it brings no harm to anybody else, you can make that choice, and I defend your right to do so. So I don't have anything bad to say about anybody who wants to change themselves. But if I was asked, and I have been a few times, I would say, what about this? You know, you in my understanding, you chose to come here and be this person with these parents, with this childhood, with these problems and these benefits.
There's a question that does arise, and I don't mean to ask. It's a very difficult question. You just might have the answer, or don't worry if you don't. But it's the choice of coming back, and then you have a child that has no choice while they're here. The trauma that a child is facing. Say in Palestine right now, a child is born and they're born in this situation, or a child that is abused in some way. Why would you choose that? I mean, feel free to not answer, by the way, because it's a question I struggle to get my head around. My traumas have put me on the floor, but they're nothing in comparison to many, many people. I have a good life. I'm very fortunate, very fortunate. I do have issues at times, and overwhelm and exhaustion and anxiety and difficulties, but I don't face some of the situations that I know my sister has faced. As an example, her life's been very difficult. It's hard to just get your head around why you would choose such a difficult path.
So I do have a response to that. And as I've said a number of times already, and I regularly say this, these are just my understandings. I could be wrong, and people should try and gather their own opinions and challenge them and try and figure it out for themselves. But you've asked a direct question, so I'll give you a direct answer. I believe that we all choose to come to experience every type of existence that there is, and that even if it's a very short life, where a child dies, be it in a war zone, or even if it's, they're born into a family where their dad's a drunk driver and he wipes out the whole family. These are choices that are made by the soul to gain these experiences and to then absorb that information. So I think the best way to look at this kind of scenario is to give a personal example. Now, the caveat at the start of this is, of course, I too live in the UK. I live in England now. I've got a good life. I've not got bullets flying through the walls of my house and bombs landing down the street, and I can get access to drinking water and food and so on. So with that said, I was raised in a situation where I was psychologically abused and, quite frankly, tortured for a number of years as a child. Now, that has shaped me. That has driven my desire to help others. I was going through this from the age of 13, and I was born in 1973. So this was from 1986 onwards. And the major traumas in my life happened in the first probably 6 or 7 years after that. It was pre-internet. There were no support groups. I was very much on my own. And I remember standing in the hallway of my mum and stepdad's home, probably 13, maybe 14, but I think 13. Standing in the hallway looking at the back of those two people walking away into the living room, having just essentially turned, both physically, emotionally and spiritually, turned their back on me. And I was left standing there thinking, oh my God, there's no one to support me.
Yeah.
they inflicted a huge amount of trauma. I wasn't sexually abused. I wasn't like beaten up. You know, it was back in the 80s where you got the leather belt and the wooden spoon and those kind of things. But everybody was getting that. Mine was more a very public shaming, very public abuse, and long-standing. The cult that I was in, I was excommunicated from it, and my stepdad, who's very pious, forced me to be at the church on the night that the announcement was made. So 250 people in this church. I was made sit down. We always sat down near the front because he liked to show face. And in the middle of this 2-hour church meeting, one of the elders got up in the middle of it and made an announcement, and it announced my name and said he has been excommunicated from the group. That meant that everybody in that group had to immediately stop talking to me, other than my close family that I lived with and the elders in the church. No one else was allowed to communicate with me, and we weren't allowed to have friends outside the church, despite living in amongst other people. We didn't live in an isolated community. So I've often described that period of my life as growing up on an island in a sea of people, but I was isolated on my island. And it was just as I was going through puberty. Very formative years. It destroyed my ability to concentrate at school. School was not a safe haven either, because many of the church members had moved to this one area so that they could have all their kids at the same school. So I couldn't avoid it at home or at school. I went through a period of grounding that lasted 6 months initially, and then went on for a long time thereafter. Really severe restrictions. So when 2020 came along and everybody was under lockdown, I was like, is this your first time? I've been through this shit before, but I was on my own. So while that's not the same as, being in some war-torn land, it was extremely torturous event. And my family, my mother, I haven't seen my mother for 8 years now, I think. The last time I saw her was in Edinburgh. She was standing on the street doing some preaching, and I walked up to her and said, I want to thank you. I want to thank you, and I want to forgive you. I want to thank you for the lessons that you've given me. Thank you for the teachings. Thank you for the traumas, the hard times, because they've made me the man that I am, and I'm quite proud. I make many mistakes. I'm not perfect in any way. I'm foolish and, jump the gun at things and, continually learning. But nonetheless, I'm proud of who I am, and I'm glad that I've got to this space. And so I want to say thank you, and I forgive you. And she didn't really know what to say. And then I said, I'll see you in the next life. And I walked away. So that was me able to really let go of all of that. And I've never really looked back from that space. But, that was 2017, no, maybe 2018. So, a few years ago now, 7 or 8 years ago. And prior to that, I hadn't seen her since 2011. That was the last time I had any proper communication with her. And to me, my mother's a bit of a living ghost. She's alive, but I can't see her. I can't go and give her a hug or knock on her door. And yet, despite all the traumas, and I could go on for a long time about all the traumas that I experienced, if I was given the choice to go back before this life and choose the experiences that I had, I would now choose the same experiences, because they've made me who I am. The way we take those experiences, the way we process them, is really important. I still am connected to the ex-cult community. I've helped a number of people over the years leave cults. Initially with just the cult that I was in, and then spread out further to all sorts of other cults. And the last few people I've helped have all been in New Age cults, which is really interesting. But in 2017, I helped two of my friends who both grew up in the cult that I was in. I helped them get married. I actually officiated at their wedding, and there were about probably close to 100 members of the same cult, all having left, all come out somewhere or other. Yeah, they were all at this wedding down in Devon. And I remember sitting around the big table. There was about 15 of us after the event. It was, you know, the evening party, and we're sat a whole bunch. And the obvious topic of conversation was the cult. And so I said, look, can we just go around the table and just one by one, just a little 30 seconds, tell us what your journey is? And lovely people, but it was misery, pain, trauma, horror. Don't want to do this again. Can't stand it. More misery, more trauma, more pain. And I went last, and I was like, well, this was my journey. This is what happened to me. And I'm really glad. I'm really happy. I'm glad to be here. I'm having a great time. Life is what you make it. And you could see their faces looking at me like, what the fuck? How did this happen? So my response to those people who say they don't want to come back is, I understand. But when you step across that threshold into that in-between zone, you get a broader perspective that you don't currently have. And with new information comes new understandings and opinions. And so when you go into that state of viewing this life in accordance with all your other past lives, and you can see the sequence of events that brought you to choosing the existence that you had, including kids born in Palestine or Syria or wherever else in the world where there's war-torn places, or someone who's born in a very abusive family, or who's brought up by a really traumatizing parent who, you know, completely demoralizes them or treats them like shit, or whatever it is that they go through. You then see in this broader perspective of multiple lifetimes that you chose that. You chose those difficult things, as hard as that might be to hear. And again, I could be wrong, but I believe I chose my mum. I believe I chose my birth father, who I never met. And there's an interesting journey there as well. And I believe I chose my stepfather, and the childhood that I had in the cult, and where it took me and what it brought me to as a teenager. And it set me off on my life path. It really genuinely has brought me to the point where I am today. I don't think, be on a shamanic path if it wasn't for that childhood. So it's what you make of it. It's what you choose to make of it. If there's trauma out there, just be good. Be the good in the world. Try and be the best that you can. Try and give wholeheartedly. Try and, as you're trying to do, Anne, try and be of service to others. To absorb your own pain and your own traumas, and use that as a knowledge base to go, how do I help others not have my experience? Because we've all, you know, heard of people who say, I went along to a therapist and they'd lived a mollycoddled life. And they went, right? And they went to university and they got a degree in this particular thing, and they don't have a fucking clue.
It was quite funny, Chris. When I had my breakdown, I went to, so they signposted me to have some counselling. So I went to this. I'd already studied to be a counsellor at this point, by the way. I'd already got my certifications and things like. And bless him, lovely. And I was sat there, and she's giving it all the spiel, and I'm telling her stuff, and she's reframing and this, that, and the other. And I said, look, I'm not going to be insulting, but I know all of this. I'll just do it myself. But she was half the age of me. She hadn't had the life I've had. Not that my life's been bad, but I've got wisdom. I'm 50 years of age now. I've endured traumas and pain to give me enough wisdom, and I've gratitude. I always say this. I've got gratitude for my traumas because I've worked on I've done the inner work. I'm continually doing the inner work, the shadow, and I brought gratitude to the pain that my childhood brought, my ex-marriage brought, all these things. I've got gratitude for them, but I can only have gratitude for them because I've worked through them now. But I can pass that wisdom on to others, which I try and do when I have a client.
Yeah.
But when you have a 20-year-old counsellor, like you say, who's just fresh out of university, bless them, who hasn't lived,
yeah,
it's a strange position to be in when.
But then the counterbalance to that is you meet someone who has had trauma, who knows, who's gone through that experience, who's gone through whatever their journey is, be it, abuse or addiction or whatever, extreme anxiety, depression, isolation.
Mm-hmm.
And they come out the other side and they then build it into their strengths. Those stumbling blocks become building blocks. And then you meet that person and you're like, oh my God, this is inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
This is amazing. So that's what we have to try and do, is try and take those traumas, turn them into beautiful facets of ourselves that we can then share with other people and try and inspire them, try and empower them. Empowering is like the big thing for me. There's too many people who profess to be healers out there, or practitioners who want people to keep coming back. They want repeat service, come back to me.
I know it's not about that. It's that's exactly, you're so nail on the head there, Chris. You've got to get this person so they have found their inner light and they're away. That's what it's about.
Yeah. If I can get a client and empower that individual, to be able to, the next time something happens, to not have to call me and be able to do it themselves, job done.
Exactly.
That's the most important. There are obviously, and I say this to clients, I'd rather you weren't continuing to come along for a treatment in X amount of years. If you have to come along every now and again, I'll help you. But what I'd rather do is give you the keys and help you find the keys so that you're empowered, so that you can do it yourself.
Absolutely. That's exactly it.
And if we all do that, then that's going to break those chains of abuse, break those chains of trauma, and we then start really moving on as individuals. And then when you come to the end of this journey, you can look back, you can go through that process and go, wow, I did good. I learned a lesson this time. Thank goodness. And then when you go into your next life, you give yourself some other task to learn, and you won't go through that trauma. You'll go through some other thing that you needed to learn. So I think everybody is going to move on to another life in some way, however that life is and wherever that life is, because I don't think life is set just here.
I don't either. I don't. So in what you're saying is that we carry an individualization from the avatar that the human experience that we have in this lifetime. There still is. I'm not saying you are, because you are not Chris Nicolson. You are much more than that. You're a divine spark. So that divinity, that spark within, has an individualization. It has carried many personalities.
Yes. Yeah, it has. I mentioned much earlier in this conversation about, where do we go at the end of all these lifetimes? Do we return to source? And I once heard the example that, and I really like this one, that the universal consciousness that some people call God, which I'm not a fan of that word. It's got too much blood attached to it. But the universal consciousness is like an ocean of consciousness out there. And you are, I am, everybody is. You are to that universal consciousness what a wave is to the ocean. It's an individual wave, but it's part of the ocean. And another way of looking at that is, if you take a vessel, a glass, a jug, whatever, which represents our body, and you scoop up some of that universal ocean of consciousness, and then that vessel, that glass of water, has a series of experiences. You heat it up, you cool it down, you take it places, and at the end of the journey, you pour it back into that ocean. The ocean grows in understanding, and that's really what we are doing. You know, individual lifetimes, you have your individual soul path, and your oversoul, that higher part of yourself, that higher self of yours, will remain conscious on its own, but it's still part of this greater universal consciousness that we're all part of. That's where that phrase, we are all one, there's unity, the universe, one verse. We are all one, but we are still individual sparks of that great consciousness.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. Before we bring this to the close, is there anything that you wanted to bring into this conversation that maybe we've missed? Because I know that, you know, you were keen to have this chat, and I don't want to miss anything out.
I think that over the course of this chat tonight, which has been great, and thank you again for having me, and thank you to all those who've listened as well. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. I think I've covered all the main points that I really wanted to make sure. You know, we had that difficult experience with the audio on the interview a few weeks ago.
We might have it on this one. Yeah, I've not listened to it yet.
Well, touch wood, it's not going to be the case. And thanks to the condenser mic as well. I think when I was looking back at that episode, and I listened to it a couple of times, and I realized that it might be difficult for people to stay true and listen to it and fight through. The audio did get better in the second half, and it was good to read those comments on your YouTube channel of those people who did push through it, and gratitude to them for doing so.
Definitely, absolutely.
But when looking back at it myself, I think I have covered. I wanted to read that little excerpt again, which I've done from that book, and I wanted to be very clear on my expression about the understanding of mediumship and the fact that to my awareness, it's all mediumship. It's not just some, it's not just a few, it's all of it. And all seance work is very, very dangerous. And I just wish and I hope that anybody who is contemplating that path, who perhaps has a gift that would allow them the ability to hear into other realms or see into other realms, that they don't necessarily go running down that road to become a medium or to work in those circles. There are alternatives. There are other things that you can do with your gift that is really powerful and very fulfilling and can become a life's work if you choose to do so. I've tried to help a few people who have those gifts. So if anybody is in that position and would like a little helping hand or a conversation that perhaps nudge them in the right direction, I implore you to reach out. And if there's anybody who has already gone down the mediumship path and would like help to disconnect and to step away and to perhaps protect their soul. If anybody's been really frightened by the thought of their soul being caught in this trap at the moment that they cross over, then there is, before it's too late, there is help available. And I would like to put myself out there to help some of those people if they're willing to try. And I am willing to help. So I think that's the one of the main other points I wanted to make sure was out there, was that there are alternatives and there is help available, not just from me. There are others who will help too, I'm sure. And I know that I've actually heard just in the last couple of weeks of some other people who are doing courses and work where they're talking about the difficulties with mediumship. So it's actually really, really good to hear that that's the case. So it's not just me. There are others. I think they're at the moment few and far between, because it's been very difficult to find information saying that this is wrong, saying that there is a problem with those kind of activities. So I want to send lots of love and good thoughts to everybody out there, and just to reiterate, to anybody who wants a helping hand, either to try and find the right path or to disconnect from the wrong path, then please reach out. And if there's anybody out there who is triggered by this and is perhaps angered by this, it's especially going to be true if someone makes a living from this, if this is how they put food on their table. I know that this is an undermining statement or series of statements to make. I appreciate that. And I didn't go public with this without thinking about that. It just has to be said. And if you are triggered, I recommend that you sit with it and contemplate it and prove me wrong to yourself. Go and study and research and look these things up. I'm willing to give some of those pieces of literature that I've read myself and the old literature to look at as well. And look at history. All the answers are in history. There's literature out there. It's not so easy to find it on the internet because it is overwhelmed by the shit that's out there online. There's so much nonsense, and somebody puts nonsense out and then 20 other websites propagate that nonsense, and then it goes down the chain. So you're better reading books and literature that's been put out there if you can find it. So I think that's the bits that I wanted to say that hadn't quite been said.
Well, I'll make sure your contact details are in the show notes.
Please do.
Then if people would need to reach out to you for help, then that makes it possible. And I think we should definitely do another chat about the moon and maybe a bit of astrology of the moon. I think the moon will be a really interesting conversation. I'd like to dig into that. And I'm sure we'll have plenty more over the coming years, months, or whatever it is. I mean, it's a funny place doing these podcasts, and I really do appreciate people watching, because there's times where you question, why am I doing this?
We get these really interesting chats, and that's what we get.
That's why I do it, because I actually love these conversations and I get so much out of it. So I really appreciate your time, Chris, as always. And much love to you, and much love to everyone that's watching. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anne. Thanks for having me.